Are you ready to grow your business, build wealth, and spark transformation in the south suburbs of Chicago? Visit southlanddevelopment.org today and sign up for our newsletter to stay connected, get resources, and be the first to hear about the Achieve Summit, where entrepreneurs, developers, investors, and changemakers come together to ignite growth and opportunity. Don't just watch change happen, be a part of it. Join the movement at southlanddevelopment.org and start building your legacy today.
Most entrepreneurs think growth means grinding harder, but what if growth means buying smarter? In this episode, I talk with Ricky O'Neill and Mirion Green of GWO Inc., part of the 2022 Acquisition Accelerator cohort, who are using acquisition as a strategy to transform their business. They've pivoted from a traditional trucking operation into an 8A government contracting company, and now they're targeting acquisitions to expand their footprint in the public sector work. If you're serious about scaling through ownership, this episode is for you.
All right. Thank you and welcome to The First Million's Always the Hardest. I'm your host, Bo Kemp. Really excited to have GWO Inc. here. We've had a chance to work with you over a number of years now, since 2022. But now you've kind of grown and developed, and take us through a little bit of that experience. But before you do, please introduce yourself to the audience, your name, and tell us a little bit about your organization.
You want to start?
I can. I'm Mirion Green. I'm the CEO, president of GWO Inc. It's a general contracting company. I come from a family of construction, great-grandfather, grandfather, father, brothers, everybody in construction. So construction is a passion of mine. I actually deviated away from it a little bit, went into banking and transportation, and came right back to it because it's an art.
Yeah.
Ricky O'Neill, I'm actually the vice president. I'm also her son. Co-owner and vice president of GWO Inc. We are, like she said, a construction company that primarily services government entities.
Yeah. And what's amazing, and we were talking a little bit about this off camera, is just the son and mother dynamic and having to work with your parents. I had a business with my son, my oldest son as well. And honestly, it was one of the most rewarding things that we did. It elevated issues sometimes between us, of course, because then you're in this weird space where you're peer, but it's still your parent. But I'm interested in just hearing just a little bit about what that dynamic has been for you.
So originally, Ricky grew up respect for his mother. And then when we became business partners, there was a difference of opinion because, of course, your kids think they know more than you do, which they do. That's why you hire your talent, right? And we have bumped heads. It has been to the point I had to say to Ricky, my name is on your birth certificate, and we have had times where we bumped heads and became upset with each other. But at the end, we know that we're mother and son because there's a love there.
And you've really invested, as you were describing, into Ricky and I'm sure your family because of your long history as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You've come, as you mentioned, from a long line of entrepreneurs. And you said you started Ricky when he was about 2 years old?
I started Ricky when he was 2. And I think it's very important that you invest. If you run a business or you want your children to go into business, that you start them early on. Mm-hmm. And Ricky was about 2, and I told Ricky, I was working at Northern Trust Bank at the time, and I would come home and teach him everything I was learning at the bank. And I told Ricky, you're never to work for anyone, you're to give out jobs. And I drove that, I brainwashed it, and I drove it into his mind, and I kept teaching him, and I kept putting the tools in front of him to help him become that entrepreneur that I needed. And I told him, I said, one day you're going to be my business partner.
Wow.
And here we are.
There you go. And now, Ricky, you have a daughter.
I do.
And so you get the opportunity to do the same, perhaps, or maybe do it a little bit differently. But as you think about the generational experience of being an entrepreneur and how to effectively pass that down to a daughter who may or may not even want to be an entrepreneur, what are the lessons that you take away from your experience with your mother that you hope to apply to your own daughter?
I would say that the lessons are not only growing up, but also what we've experienced in business thus far, right? And I think of everything through frameworks, right? So what are the smallest lessons or the smallest nuggets that I can continuously teach her that will allow her to be successful overall? So I wouldn't even necessarily call it just through entrepreneurship, but how do you be an effective person? And I think that once she becomes an effective person, it'll lead her down this path.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We at the Southland Development Authority have had the chance to work with you since 2022.
Seems so long ago.
It does seem like a whole lifetime ago when we had started something called the Acquisition Accelerator, and you were part of the original cohort that we had worked with, and the goal of that was to actually help encourage people learn how to and actually buy additional businesses. Since then, or even during that time period, one of the reasons we focused on that space is because if you look since COVID, of the number of businesses that have been started in the United States, the segment of the population who started the most businesses are women, and particularly women of color. And you guys are a business that is run by a woman of color and people of color. And so it falls right in line with a lot of what we were thinking is important. And we really fundamentally believe that this idea around entrepreneurship through acquisition is really got huge implications, right? It not only allows us to transfer wealth from baby boomers to younger generations, it allows us to take some folks who may have always identified entrepreneurship as struggle and help them see the opportunity to grow at a faster pace and create the sort of momentum and economies of scale that make their business really work. When you were originally thinking about buying a business back in 22, 23, kind of what was your thinking then, and how has it changed since then about thinking about acquiring a business?
Well, back then I just wanted to do something,
Yeah.
right? And it was exciting because it was a new avenue of growth, right? The story of, let's say, 2020 to around 2023 was really us just trying to find our footing and find our new identity after transitioning from a trucking company.
Yeah.
Now I think that we have a bit more direction as a company overall, and I believe that we're a bit more targeted with how a new company can fit inside of our current operating system.
When back then you were looking at a variety of businesses, and if I remember correctly, you had found one that was about a $5 million acquisition cost, something in that range? Or
so the last, it was around $5 to $6 million, and it was a single operator,
right?
And it was, and I'm not sure who the audience is, but it was a business that I'm not sure if we could have taken and scaled. Right.
And what is it about that business? So in terms of the audience we're speaking to, we're speaking to some people who are in your position, but we're also speaking to people who aspirationally are like, how in the world could I ever buy a business? And I want to hear how you thought about it, what you decided to do, and even what you decided not to do as a lesson and maybe an example for them. So you speak as openly as you feel comfortable, but think of it as an opportunity to share with other people skill sets and experiences that, but for what you've experienced, they would never have.
So, we were, like you said, we started off all over the place. We had no idea what our target was. I think that we looked from everything from daycares to construction companies to whatever. We ultimately settled on, we wanted to find a company that we can, the same money that we would spend hiring an individual, we can spend that same cash on acquiring the company, and then we also have that company's customers. I'll never forget this. When I actually sat down at the table with who was the owner, he had concrete all through his fingernails. Right? And for those who might not know why that's a red flag, it meant that once we took over that operation, I would have concrete over my hands. And it scared us, and it kind of made us take a step back. And when we said, look, we need another way to really identify who our targets are, and to source additional businesses. We decided at that point we would attempt to better figure out who GWO is as a company, so then we can better identify who that target is for acquisition.
That's interesting. And two things jump out at me there. One, very smart on your part to recognize that this gentleman who was selling the business to you, he wasn't just the architect around the business. He wasn't just the manager. He was also the worker. And there's nothing wrong in the beginning as an entrepreneur being all three of those things. But as you scale your business, if you continue to serve in each of those three roles, it becomes very problematic because you can't scale the business. You can't grow effectively if you're the only one doing all the work. So that was really, really smart on your part. The other thing that really is interesting to me is the idea of what they call sometimes acqui-hire, where essentially you were acquiring a business in part to hopefully get staff and customers rather, in that process. And so you had kind of really jumped ahead and thought about that as a growth opportunity for you. The third thing I think jumps out at me is your honesty in that you're still trying to figure out, like, what are you? And I think that's actually more common than people want to admit. I think a lot of businesses want to say, well, I started as such and I know I'm going to be this. But when you look at some of the best companies in the country, they started in one area and they ended up doing something completely different at the end.
So American Express started off as a trucking company, right? So and you know,
Right.
I think that I've said around 2020 to around 2023, something else happened that was incredible then, right? We actually start looking at other businesses, reaching out to other people that were more successful than us, and we realized, you know, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million dollar businesses, they're still trying to figure it out, right?
Yep.
And you know, we did a lot of soul searching at that time, and it kind of led us down the rabbit hole that we are now.
Well, I think that's a really important point that I want for the listeners to take away. And I liken it to that experience when you meet people who are rich and famous and they're not in like the paparazzi crowd, they're just hanging out at a barbecue. They're like regular people, right? And you realize that you actually are not that different from these people that are running $100 million, billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
They just, the surface looks different, but the reality of what you're doing every day really isn't.
And you're right. And to your point, I've had people think that our company was much larger than what it is.
Right.
And I've actually interacted with people that are in $145 million companies, but they're trying to seek my expertise.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we all walking the same walk and trying to figure it out.
everybody is. But one thing that you did specifically, even back then that was different, is you knew that you needed to both basically learn some things to get to the next level.
Yes.
And you were prepared to invest some time to do that. And so you started actively working with us and others on figuring out, how do I evaluate a company? What should what they call buy box, like what are the elements of a company's performance that makes them a target for me? And you started to learn a lot. The other benefit you had was you started talking to a lot of different types of businesses. So you started to get really smart about a range of businesses and some of the questions. What are some of the things that you learned in that process of talking to all these businesses that you can apply to the opportunities that are in front of you today?
So I'm gonna let Ricky talk, because Ricky took the SDA and he pretty much talks with them.
I think that what a good opportunity looks like, right? And as easy as that is, it's very hard to identify when you're really looking at it, right? So number one, what does a good market opportunity look like?
Yeah.
That led us to actually finding the acquisition accelerator, that actually led us to the federal government. And, you know, just to, you know, kind of open that onion a bit.
Yeah, please.
We were in trucking. That was our primary means of income. Cash flow was a bit slower than we would have liked. We were primarily dependent on diversity certifications, right? So when you're in that world, it doesn't look strange, right? You know, but then I had a conversation with another business. I think they were in IT, and they said, yeah, well, we have a 10-day net payable. And I said, I'm sorry.
How's that possible?
Right.
Right?
I said, you know, we have some that's, 6 months,
Easily.
right? A year out,
Yeah.
right? And they said, yeah, 10 days. And if they don't pay us by then we cut their service. So I started to go down a rabbit hole of, hey, well, where can we apply this same framework? Where are customers, or what do the opportunities look like, right?
Yeah.
And then it led us to realize we have to change our entire business model, right? So through a range of having conversations with people, just really trying to find that answer, it led us to, look, maybe acquisition is a possibility. So what kind of led us to the company that we spoke about earlier is they had, looking at their books, I think that they were 15-day net, right?
Yeah.
So they were dealing with private clients, but the 15-day net, we ended up not going that direction. But we realized that even that industry was a little bit friendlier to smaller businesses than it was with us.
And just for the listeners, when you say 15-day net, what you mean is that I make a sale and in 15 days I get paid.
That's correct.
And so it's a cash flow issue. And the faster you get money in, the faster you can grow. There's something that I talk about called the sustainable growth equation, which I will not go through for the benefits here, but there is a podcast that's just about the sustainable growth equation that you can listen to on The First Million is always the hardest. But one of the keys is cash flow, because the quicker you turn your money over, the faster you get to grow. And you've actually started to experience a part of this. Not only have you moved into a space now that you are certified to be able to do work with the federal government where you are getting faster payments, but you're getting bigger contracts on top of it.
We are.
And so it's causing a different type of issue, which is how do I actually meet all of the demand that I've now been able to generate? And talk a little bit about, actually two things, if you wouldn't mind. Talk a little bit about the experience of being certified, going through that process, especially in today's political environment where the federal government has pulled back so many resources. I think many people are surprised at the idea that you could secure new government contracts in the midst of this kind of chaos that has helped you grow your business. So talk a little bit about that process. And then secondly, I'm curious as to how you're planning to address the growth possibilities that you have in front of you now, which are just substantially greater than what you were thinking before.
So I know. No, I was just about to say, a lot of people running from the federal government, we run into it.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
No, I was good. Starting with number 2. Yeah. Hiring and partnership, right?
Yes.
I mean, the point blank period, right? So since we see what the opportunities are in front of us, we understand that we aren't able to do it alone. Just a quick anecdote: we were working on the opportunity that we just have that we're currently working on. Yeah. We were preparing ourselves to get it done, and then we said, hey, look, maybe we need a partner on this. 20 days, 30 days into the opportunity, I turned to my mother and I said, it's no way we could have did this by ourselves.
Yeah.
I said, he has 30 years of experience, and we were trying to use ChatGPT to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And not only that, the partner that we had was a former 8A company.
Right.
And they have the experience. And of course, a lot of companies, when they come out of their 8A, they still really want to be in, which is a great way to partner with incoming or someone that's in the 8A. So we are, it's a great marriage because we're learning their experience and we're working together, and it's a great partnership.
And just for everybody to understand, the 8A program is a government contracting program that once you are eligible for, there's a whole series of bids, no competition bids, and bidding products that you're now eligible for. And how much does the government spend on 8A contracts? Do you know by any chance?
Ricky, you've done that research.
So
right?
I did. With our I can tell you our next specifically last year for construction, it was around 40 or 50 million that was specifically sole source for construction companies inside of Illinois.
Wow. That's just a huge...
You might want to tell them what sole source.
So sole source are direct award contracts where you don't have to bid. You know, you are going against the government's estimate, so it has to be within range, right? But you still don't have to bid against additional competition.
Yeah, no,
and
that's amazing.
It's a business growth program within the federal government.
Yeah.
Going back to your first question, which is how did certification help us, right? So we lived in the land of MB, DB, WB, and I think that those programs are absolutely phenomenal because it gives small businesses a chance when otherwise they wouldn't for public bid contracts. But we also realized that there was another tier and another level of contracts that we can consider, right? And that's what led us to the 8A world and the federal government world. We found that the federal government is nicer to small businesses, that they actually have contracts that, you know, larger construction companies who are billion-dollar construction companies can't even participate on, right? Even if they wanted to. So we said, look, let's go this route, and if we wanted to, we can flip the dynamic and they can subcontract under us.
Right.
And it, you know, it's not necessarily about hubris or ego, but you know, if you're never the prime on a contract, you can never really learn how to deal with a government agency yourself.
And it's hard to bitch to be prime if you've never been a prime.
Exactly.
And furthermore, on the certification, local certifications, a lot of our jobs came from being certified. I mean, even though we competitively bid on them, because we had that certification, it qualified us over someone that might have been a little lower than we are. But going into the federal government is a whole different ballgame. Even getting paid in 10 days.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny. I did work during the pandemic, or right before the pandemic, with a group that started out as a HVAC company in Miami. But they ended up becoming a multi-million-dollar provider of 8A contracting services. So much so that they actually made so much money that they basically grew out of the program, because there's a limit to how much revenue you could make.
Wow,
and
but
just
I was about to say, prior to us becoming 8A, well, we actually researched and went to different conferences before we became an 8A company.
Yeah.
And we built these relationships with some of the agencies so that when we put that trigger and became an 8A company, that we were already a step ahead.
Right.
I remember going to a conference in New Orleans, and this lady said she started off, she was doing about $25 million a year. But she started off as a janitorial business,
Right.
and she bid it and did some hardware, some doorknobs for the federal government, which led her into construction. And within 3 or 4 years, she was at $20 million.
Wow, that's amazing.
And going back to the HVAC company, that I remember having a conversation with you last year.
Yeah, it might have been.
And it it again just expanded the worldview of, hey, maybe this is an avenue and a possibility that we can take on. So one of the things that you asked us was, what are we searching for right now?
Yeah.
We're still developing our thesis,
Yeah.
but we believe that it works along with how we're serving the federal government, right?
Yeah. No, I think, the other element I'm interested in, a little bit of a different take, is why? So Mom, you had been very intent that your son was always going to be an entrepreneur, and you come from an entrepreneurial background, but what's the reason that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I think I was just born to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to be honest. Even growing up, everything I wanted to do was own my own business. When people say, what do you want to be? And all the kids will say, I want to be a teacher, I want to be an attorney. I just say, I want to own my own business. And even starting off at Northern Trust, I graduated from high school, started at Northern Trust. The day I walked through that door, I told them, I said, I'm only going to be here 2 years.
Wow.
Because I'm starting my own business. But I think everything is in divine order, because Northern Trust prepared me to become an entrepreneur. There were some things that I needed on that journey. I think about The Alchemist. When I read The Alchemist, everything prepares you on your journey. And I think Northern Trust was what I needed to actually run this business, from the professionalism to the classes to the leadership to the management. I learned all that at Northern Trust, and I brought it into my business, because customer service is key.
Absolutely.
And your word is key. Providing that great product is key. So all of those things prepared me, and I just knew from early on in my gut I was going to be an entrepreneur. And I just felt that it was going to be no different from, I thought I was going to have more children for my children. But Ricky, I just started. I was like, you're going to be my business partner one day.
So what's your why, Ricky?
Two buckets, right? So, personally, I like to build things, right?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's not even about the money. It's about seeing the thing grow. But secondly, I think that it's the quickest avenue to wealth generation.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just read I just showed it. I was in Memphis this past weekend. I showed a young lady. We had a round table of women, and we were talking about entrepreneurship. And I said, I just read a comment from an attorney. He said the quickest way to wealth is entrepreneurship and acquisition.
Yeah. No question about it. And other people's money, of course.
Yeah.
And they say I'm always trying to put people in business.
Yeah. Well, two things about that. The one, and you had hinted at this earlier, Ricky, but the idea of being an entrepreneur, one of the things that I find that's amazing about it is that you get to employ people.
Yeah.
People actually feed their family and take care of their families because you have a business that pays them. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be really satisfying. It sounds like that's in line, with you too, and the way you guys think about it.
It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling. I thought about this past, was it Friday? We had a meeting with our team. We have a meeting every day with our team. Mm-hmm. And on Friday, we called it Grateful Friday.
Yeah.
And one of the young men on our team had a really nice hoodie on it. Ricky commented on it. And everybody on the team started commenting on it. So I said, remember Oprah, everybody? When she said, you get a gift and you get this. So I said, I'm going to order up these hoodies for everyone. And I told my team, you get a hoodie and you get a hoodie. And their face just lit up. It's the little things.
Yeah.
Even though you pay them, it feels good to pay them, but it also feels good to contribute to them and their families, to help their families grow.
Even taking it a step further outside of just the financial compensation, I mean, because everybody shows up to work, right?
Right.
But
Sure.
we're recently starting to roll out ways that we can upskill them, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're not going to be with us forever, right?
Yeah.
But they can take those skills and they can apply them elsewhere, and I think that feels good as well.
Yes.
I think there's a third part of that is unsaid, but I can feel it from you, which is you also get to take risk on people that other people might not. You get to use your own judgment about what are the skill sets and the experiences and what's the kind of background that you're willing to give a job to someone that may be very different from someone else. And I think that's one of the things that's often missed in this conversation about why it's important that a diverse set of people own businesses. It isn't simply that you're only going to hire people that look and act just like you, but it's that you have a different perception about what risk is, depending on your background and experience, that allows you to assess someone differently than someone whose background is wildly different. And I think that's a really important aspect that's particularly now, right? When the country's moving in a direction where the people who are going to be the majority of the workers and the majority of owners will not look like the folks who've been the majority of the owners in the past.
Yeah. And we get to be on the forefront of that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No small deal at all. Quick question. If nothing changes in your life for the next 5 years, are you okay with that? If the answer is no, you don't need more motivation. You need a new design. I created the Life Design Masterclass for people like you, high achievers who feel stuck but know they're meant for more. In 60 minutes, I'll walk you through a step-by-step blueprint to realign your money, your time, and your purpose. Go to lifedesign.com, that's LIFEDESYN.com, and grab your spot today.
You're listening to The First Million is Always the Hardest. We are now returning to the show.
One of the things I'm interested in understanding too, we've had a chance to talk to some entrepreneurs who've approached the opportunity to be an entrepreneur with the intent of, I'm going to make as much money as I can and I'm going to get out.
Yeah.
That's how I was raised in my financial world. When I worked at Morgan Stanley and I was at Harvard Business School, basically what they teach you is plan the exit before you even buy a company. Be out of that thing within 2 to 7 years at the most. That's the goal, right? But we've also had a chance to interview some folks. One of them, Divya Bell, who came on the show, who is intentionally building a 100-year-old business. Her intention is to build a family business that will last for 100 years.
Right.
And she's actually not interested in exiting at all. She's interested in acquiring, but she's interested to acquire in order to build kind of an empire. When you guys think about what your goal is collectively for GWO Inc., are you thinking that you're building an empire? And if so, kind of how do you think about those pieces? Or are you thinking about, at some point, I'm going to cash out? No shame in selling, because that's how you extract value from the business that you create. But where are you kind of leaning?
So I can start off with where I'm coming from with this. I think we are definitely building, right? But I'm building for somewhere down the line, maybe 8 years for me to exit out. And whatever Ricky decides from there, whether he want to continue to build or whether he want to sell, I think that would be in his hands. But I want to build as much as we can, the value of this business and the scale of this business to the point where when I leave, whatever he decides is his decision.
Yeah.
I play chess, right? So, and a lot of times when you play chess, when people say think 3 to 4 moves ahead, oftentimes what they're saying is imagine a scenario of what happens at this given point in time. And I think that regardless of where we are, the first step that we're trying to get to is have the business run autonomously.
Yeah.
And I think that whether that's for, the valuation of the business, or whether that's for, our own sanity, because we're putting in a lot of hours right now, I think that that's where we're growing to right now. My wife also brought a story to me about how a family looks at finances, and they bring their kids to the table and they say, hey, these are our finances. So when I buy you something, it's taken out of our collective pot, right? So when I think about the business, the actual business itself, the S corp that we have, I don't think that itself is the family business, right? The family business can be more than that. And if in a future scenario, if we had to exit the business in order to take that capital and do something with, I think the family business within itself is still intact, if that makes sense.
I got you. It's interesting. I think many of us struggle with what they call kind of G1 to G2, generation 1 to generation 2, or even more generation 2 to generation 3. And it isn't just a question of what have I left behind for my generations that come after me. It's how do I train them and get them ready to be in a position to run the business when I'm no longer there. And you were just describing how, you as mom are going to at some point exit and then hand this over. But you've been training him since he was 2, right? So you've had a lot of work together, and he's had a lot of work on his own. Many people really struggle with this issue of how do I train my kids? I'll tell you, for me, I have a few different businesses I'm invested in, and one of my businesses is a family business. Specifically, it's for the family business. And so I have a board meeting for 2 weeks every year, where I ask my kids to come in town to see me and stay with me, and then we talk about the business. I attempt to try to teach them about the business. I attempt to give them an experience of what it is to be on a board and how to think about those sorts of things in that context. And it's just our board, but it's in hopes that as they get older, when they start to do things on their own, they'll have a sense of that. Now, my kids, only through pain will suffer and do any of this work with me, because they don't fully appreciate what it is that I'm doing yet, but I still try to do it anyway. And I'm just curious, as you think about, you mentioned already your granddaughter has an office.
At my house.
At your house.
Laptop,
so she's 7, she comes in, goes to work.
Yeah, even at the office.
Yeah, you're setting her up.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've been thinking about for your family, and how do you deal with your distant family? We all have 1,000 cousins. And folks that are always in need for different things. How do you manage that as well?
I'm very fond of the term, too much is given, much is required. I use discernment. I watch what they do, especially the men. I'm like, if I could run a business, you can go out there and work. But I watch how they manage their money, because I manage my money well, and you're not going to mismanage mine. But if there's a need, I step up to the plate and actually provide. Yeah.
That's also a bit of a burden sometimes.
It is.
It sounds like you've always been the entrepreneurial person in your family.
To this day, I'm still the go-to person.
And I'm sure everybody assumes you have all kind of money, whether you have it or not.
Or the resource.
When I was a little kid, much to my kids' chagrin, my mother confessed to them I did not get any kind of allowance because I worked since I was 8 years old. Much like you were doing to your son, that's how I was. And so I always had money. So I didn't ask for a whole lot, and I didn't get an allowance because I was banking money. I was like Scrooge Duck. I was counting my money in buckets and putting it underneath my bed and all types of things. And it does give you a different perspective of the world when you're young and you have money to buy things. But it also means that everybody comes and asks you for things.
And to be totally transparent, I previous owned a school bus company. And boy, if you came to me and said I needed $20,000, I was just giving it to you, no questions asked, just giving you the money, no questions asked. Then it came to a point where I didn't know, when we started this business, and trucking is very hard.
Yeah, it is.
I didn't know how I was going to pay my light bill. And the same people that I was investing this money in
weren't investing back, were they?
It was like, you had it, you don't have it anymore, you're in trouble. It's like I never existed. And as I was praying one day, and I'm like, I just cannot believe this. All these people I helped, and now I need to pay my light bill. And I was praying one day, and it came to me. God clearly said to me, when you get on your feet, those same people will come back.
They sure will.
And
with
if
no
I
shame.
do not lay it on your heart, do not give it.
Yeah.
And I carry that with me now. You can ask me for $20,000 a day. If it's not laid on my heart, I'm not giving it to you.
Yeah.
And it was clearly led that we enable people sometime. They on the journey and they have to learn lessons, and we step in and enable them. And we have to learn to say no, especially if it's not laid on our heart to give.
So now when you think of yourselves as entrepreneurs, you're still people, and you have your own fears and insecurities. What are the types of fears and insecurities you've had to overcome to take the next steps, or what you think you may have to overcome to take the next step as an organization?
Self-doubt. That's a really big one,
Yeah.
right? So if you follow our story, we came from, I was actually working at the school for a year prior to us starting a trucking company. From one truck to multiple trucks to subcontracting trucks to general contracting to doing work for the Army Corps of Engineers.
Right.
At every single place, there was ego that got in the way that said, I'm not sure if you're good enough for this, right? And then we had to kind of tear that down and just push for it anyway.
You know, it's funny because even in the interaction that we had with the acquisition accelerator, I remember hearing that you were not sure that you could acquire this other business because they were so much larger than you, you know, but that's actually natural. And what you just described is really important because self-doubt is a function of lack of evidence, right? And as you accumulate evidence of your capacity, it becomes very difficult to doubt anymore. You just told a story of going from one truck to servicing the Army Corps of Engineers, right? So you've proven it every step of the way that there should be no reason for you to have doubt because you just did this, right? Now you're just taking the same experience and putting it in another direction. But sometimes it takes repeated efforts like that to convince yourself that this is a body of enough evidence to demonstrate what my capacity is. Part of the reason, frankly, I wanted you guys on this program is explicitly that. It's to show people that there's evidence of folks who are out here doing exactly what it is that they want to do.
And Ricky and I bring different gifts to the table. Ricky is the one that's more conservative. I'm the risk taker. I'm the one to say, let's just do it. So we do balance each other.
Yeah.
We balance each other out. And then when there's a struggle between the risk taking and the being conservative, his wife actually worked over. We brought her in from, she was HR for Takeda, then she went to Meta, then she went to Discover. And we pulled her from Discover. We needed her talent on our team, which has helped scale our company tremendously. And she's out in between and say, okay, here's what we need to do.
Every once in a while they gang up on you, Ricky. It's
Every
two against one.
Every once in a while, right. And I still win.
Yeah, right. At
Bo,
least in your
Bo,
mind.
do you believe that?
In your mind you win.
Bo, do you, right?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm
Right,
there.
right.
I'm there. It's fascinating because we talked a little bit about this off camera too, but there's this ethos that I feel has gone around for a lot of people. Never mix business with family, right? And be careful of doing business with your friends because you'll jeopardize a relationship. You know, in another one of my businesses that's in California, we say that if there is no conflict, there is no interest, right? So that you need to be either a friend, a family member, a business partner, or an investor. And if you're not at least two of those things, I don't want to do business with you because I don't want to rely just on our friendship for you to make a decision. I want there to be some other secondary interest that you have to think about in addition to our friendship. But that kind of perspective is a different one. And what I found is that the wealthiest people that I've interacted with in the world, they do business with their friends and they do business with their family regularly. But that's not kind of the mainstream thinking around that. And I'm curious, as you think about developing your business, you're going to get a chance to subcontract and hire a bunch of people. How do you think about the idea of conflicts of interest in doing business with friends and other family?
I'm still learning. I had a friend come to me, asked me to hire her son. I told her no. And she said, why? I said, because I value friendship. I said, and if your son, mother's they make sure they look out for their children,
Yeah.
regardless how old they are. I said, and if your son does not perform, he's not going to be treated any different, which would damage our relationship. So I'm still learning on how to bridge that.
Yeah.
I'm still learning as well, and I think this relationship has taught us a lot. So when we started the business, I was 24 years old. So
Wow.
now looking back on it, I was a kid, right? and I had to learn and grow through the business, and with that, it was also managing the dynamic between my mother and myself. When I thought that I had a better idea, how do I come to her? And it might be easier said than done, because in business you have to, it's very difficult to weed around emotional lines, right?
Yes.
And time is of the essence, and you have to get it across. So just working between both of those dynamics.
Partnerships are one of the reasons that many businesses fail. It's also one of the things that stops people. In addition to self-doubt and fear, the relationship with your partner. And by partner, when we talk about partnership, it's broader than just a spouse. It's like a family member, in your case, your mother, who's also your business partner. It can also be someone that you take care of. It could also be a friend or a classmate or a colleague. But most people struggle because the dynamic of the conversation between their partnership allows for too much uncertainty. And what we found is that when the partnership has a transparent conversation, even when people don't agree, they're not surprised. And as long as they're not surprised, they can at least rationalize what's happening. But the moment that one partner does something that surprises the other one, it starts to erode trust to a place where it becomes really difficult to actually move forward. And I'm sure you've had many instances where you guys have had to address this as an issue and kind of get to the other side. Are there any lessons that you could share with folks about how you have that conversation when your mother's like, I brought you in here, I can take you out. My name's on that birth certificate.
So I think that the easiest way, we have not always been aligned, as you can probably tell, and there has been some times where it's been worse than others. One time where it got particularly difficult for us to have a conversation, we brought in the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and we actually read it together.
Oh, that's nice.
And I think that kind of set the base work for how we still communicate today. Now, sometimes there are uncomfortable situations still, but we understand what our communication dynamic is, and then we're able to work through it. I think that understanding who you're dealing with and who you're communicating with is important, right? So I've learned that I am a straight, factual, logical communicator. My mother, communicates through emotion, right? Neither one of them are wrong, but you sometimes you have to tailor your communication to the listener.
Yeah. And then sometimes I do feel that I don't care how much business you have, wisdom outweighs it. Yeah. And there's a lot of times through wisdom I try to communicate to Ricky that this is the route we need to go, or this is the way we need to look at it. Long of the short that I step back. I step back and I analyze our conversation and say, is this emotion? How should I look at this? How should I reapproach this? But I need time.
Yeah.
Because I do react from an emotional standpoint, even though I'm acting with wisdom.
Yeah.
So, I think that to Ricky's point, we still don't agree on everything, but we are to the point where we know how to get through it.
Yeah.
Well, and one of my favorite quotes is, if 2 business partners agree on everything, then one is not necessary.
Absolutely.
Right? Like that friction is actually what creates better ideas.
No question about it, I think. And I've had the benefit of starting businesses alone and with other people. Starting with a partner, I think, is always better because of that friction. That friction actually forces you to, every once in a while, second guess, like, really, should I do it this way? Does that person have a point? Well, now you guys are in a really good spot in a difficult time. And usually when businesses are kind of engaged at those moments where the economic climate is difficult, that's a great sign, because as it improves, you start to improve dramatically. What's your plan for growth? How are you going to manage the growth that's potentially in front of you in the next several years?
Definitely capacity. We are struggling with capacity. We have to put the right person that fit our cultural. the skill set and everything. And we're doing that now. We're doing it before we actually have that need.
Yeah.
Well, we actually do have a need, but before we have the major need, we're actually scaling people. And again, I mentioned that my daughter-in-law works with us, and she has an HR background, so she's very instrumental in helping us bring these people in. So capacity is huge.
So I'm of the belief that there has been money that has propped up the economy, and at some point the bottom will fall out. I mean, it might not be '08, but
it could be worse.
Right. so and we've decided to go after areas that we believe will have some sort of financial backing during that time period. The federal government is going to continue to spend money, right?
Right.
And even above and beyond our 8A certification, we're learning what that looks like. We're going through, what I would consider a PhD level of education of how to actually communicate and deal on a federal construction project, which is wildly different than anything that we've ever dealt with.
Yeah.
So that's a very long-winded way of saying that we're attempting to find places that have a moat built around them that we can find the opportunity, and then we can attach great talent to it.
No, I think that's really, really wise. Just as we start to wrap up, the first million is always the hardest. The name of the show is because there are technical reasons behind that, right? It's difficult when you're starting from zero to build inertia, to break through inertia and start to build momentum. It's difficult when the law of small numbers means that if I only have one, if I get 10% on top of one, I'm only at 1.1, right? But if I'm at 5 million, then 10% of 5 million is $500,000. All of these different things kind of impact technically how I make my first million. But there's psychological issues that you've also talked about, right? The things that we all have, the fears, the doubts, and the like. All of this is really about personal fulfillment. Money is actually only an outcome after you've gotten to some level of personal fulfillment. How do you guys think about personal fulfillment within the context of GWO Inc. and what you're trying to do now?
All of it is about growth, right? And all of it, I heard a great saying, which is the business doesn't grow as much as it grows you as a person while working on the business, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm at least speaking for myself. I am, I've gotten into long distance running. I've gotten into some other things that help just challenge me on a day-to-day basis. And I think that this is another feather in that hat that continuously challenged me in order to grow.
Yeah.
So I echo what Ricky says, in addition to lessons learned. The things that we have failed at, the things that we're good at, we take those lessons and use them to our benefit. So lessons are huge.
Absolutely.
Back to the personal growth, I totally agree with him, because with a business come personal challenge. There's stress.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to take care of your body, take care of your mind. And even your families,
Yeah.
You have to learn when to pull away or when to cut that laptop off and spend time with your family. So it's all wrapped up. It's all wrapped up together. It's huge.
Well, listen, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to come in. I want to make sure to follow your story, because I think your story is going to be really interesting and powerful to a lot of people. Not just your growth of GWO, but the growth of how you guys build your relationship and how you build the company. So again, just thank you for coming in to The First Million's Always the Hardest, and look forward to meeting with you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank
Bo.
you for having
All right.
us.